Hello, and welcome to the Module 11 commentary video, RIM Program Management for LIS 886. As we prepare to dive into the world of business, please take a moment to adjust your video and sound settings. If you encounter any difficulty viewing this video, please contact me as soon as possible. Prior to viewing this video for Module 11, please read pages 117 to 165 in the Con Blair text. Also, please read the handout on Canvas called Accelerating Out of the Recession, New Approaches in Executing RIM Program Strategies by Bruce Dearstein. Directions on where to locate the handout will be available in your Module 11 to-do list posted on Canvas. So this is the week where we begin to discuss the management aspect of working in the RIM space. Why management, you say? I didn't sign up for an MBA, you might say. Well, here's the reality. The ICRM, also known as the Institute for Certified Records Managers, the governing body for the Certified Records Manager Test Series, it cares so much about management and business-related concepts that it dedicated an entire section of the CRM exam to management and business principles. And to me, it makes perfect sense. As a RIM program director, I cannot imagine not knowing the basic concepts of business. So over the next few weeks, it's my hope to expose you to the bare minimum of business principles in hope that you will absorb the basic concepts and be somewhat proficient in the language of business as you approach jobs in the RIM career space. When I speak of management in the context of RIM, I'm speaking directly to the concept of managing people. In other words, management is the act of directing an organization or perhaps a program unit's activities in the RIM arena. Management is all-encompassing, or rather it spans the spectrum of planning, organizing, leading, and controlling all aspects of a RIM program. Essentially, management in the RIM arena is getting things done through the efforts of others. How does RIM management differ from marketing management, you might ask? Well, there's actually very little difference. What you can do in one space, you can do in another as it comes to management. But what I'm hoping to do here is to show you how management and RIM interact so you can see it playing out in the different areas. When it comes to management, I'm sure a whole group could name off the positive and negative traits of a good manager. In essence, a successful RIM manager should obtain at minimum the 5 competencies listed on the screen. Some of these might seem quite obvious, but some may be a bit surprising. As a RIM program manager, you are a strategist. Even if you never signed up to be a manager, it's possible you will be named director or perhaps chief records officer manager at some point during your career. If you receive one of these awesome titles, you will be responsible for setting the vision of a RIM program. Also, effective managers must have a keen understanding of global records management. At places such as Caterpillar, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and Hyatt, RIM program managers must operate in the international arena. As such, an effective RIM program manager must have a baseline understanding of how international markets, rules, and other items may impact their work in the RIM space. Oftentimes, you will hear about power within an organization relating to the RIM function. On the screen, 5 important power types are listed. Legitimate power is the authority granted by the organization to the formal management position as a manager. Reward power stems from the ability to bestow awards, whether that be a promotion, a raise, or a pat on the back. The authority to punish or recommend punishment is called coercive power. Expert power derives from a person's greater skill or knowledge about the task being performed. And finally, referent power derives from personal characteristics such that people admire the manager and want to like or identify with the manager out of respect and admiration. Be sure to know the differences between these power types and know how they might relate to your job as a RIM manager and what you can do to be an effective program manager. Another important aspect of RIM program management relates to organizational structures. As a question in your RIM program interview, I asked you to discuss how the professional's RIM role fits into the greater organizational structure. As such, you should be familiar with the different organizational structures encountered in the RIM space. The most common organizational structure seen in the market is the functional organizational chart, as you can see on your screen. This traditional organizational structure is typically top-down, and you'll see items such as presidents, vice presidents, directors, and other such roles, all the way down to line employees. You're going to come across this most often, so I want you to be familiar with the typical way an organization lays out. If you don't know how your organization functions, make sure you take a look at the org chart, perhaps contact your HR department to know who reports to who and how many layers that person is under the president. In contrast, a matrix organization, otherwise known as matrix management, is the practice of managing individuals with more than one reporting line. It is also commonly used to describe management cross-functional, cross-business groups, and other forms of working that cross the traditional vertical business units, otherwise known as silos, of function and geography. While less common, this type of structure is popping up all over the place, so to speak. Working in a matrix organization can have unique ramifications on a RIM program in that you may have multiple reporting points or be asked to manage or work with teams in disparate units across the organization. Again, be sure you know how your organization is laid out and what your responsibility may be when it comes to managing or working with other areas of an organization, especially if your organization is laid out like a matrix. No discussion of RIM program management would be complete without a venture into the world of human resources. So, let's get out the government forms and talk a little bit about payroll. Since you've all had a job in the past, most talk of payroll can be a bit of review. However, be sure to know how RIM employees will be paid, whether that would be hourly or salaried. Also, be sure to know the difference between exempt and non-exempt employees. As a review, exempt employees are not covered under the overtime provision of the Fair Labor Standards Act. As a non-exempt employee, organizations are required to pay these folks at 1.5 times the normal rate of pay for any hours logged over 40. Certain exceptions do apply, but this is pretty much the standard. Also, a growing trend in the labor market is the use of contract, otherwise known as temp to hire employees. A good way to find out if an employee is a fit for an organization is to hire that employee on a finite contract. Then, during the contract period, the employee could be hired full-time if they work out. In most contract situations, the employee is not eligible for company benefits, which may include health care, pension, and other elements like that. While historically used, you will find contract or temp to hire employees will be increasing in numbers due to recent changes in the labor and employee laws. So just make sure you're aware that you could possibly be hiring contract or temp employees as a part of your RIM program unit. Regarding benefits, be sure to know what your organization has to offer, especially when recruiting and managing employees. While I'm sure your organization has a good HR function, it's always helpful to know what employees can have to enhance their work-life experience. In most cases, organizations offer a flexible or cafeteria benefit style plan where employees can choose the elements which best suit their life situation. Usually these cafeteria plans encompass a choice of health and dental insurance, pension offerings, retirement offerings, and a possible company ownership. Also, employees will likely have access to a bank of vacation employee sick time or other elements. It's also helpful to know what the options are for employees who have a major life event, such as divorce, birth of a child, sick relative, or maybe a personal illness. In such event, employees may have access to short-term disability coverage, FMLA, or perhaps flex scheduling and telecommuting. Again, these are all things to know as a manager, as you may be asked to help an employee navigate some of these waters. The RIM space also goes into treacherous territory at times with occupational hazards. RIM employees may be asked to venture into tight storage spaces, open boxes of musty, dusty records, or a whole host of other requests which may be a hazard to an employee's health. As such, be sure to provide employees with items perhaps as simple as particle masks, all the way up to complex items such as safer work environments to inspect records. If you're really concerned about the health and welfare of employees, be sure to work closely with your HR department. If your organization lacks proper HR oversight, you may want to contact your local government office or maybe ask for monies to consult with outside HR experts. The last thing you'd want to do as an employer is endanger the good people who work for you. With that said, make sure your employees are aware, otherwise known as the right to know, if an area is dangerous to work in or function. Several important rules imposed by the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, otherwise known as OSHA, govern employee actions in an effort to protect them. Also, and sometimes glossed over, is the concept of ergonomics. RIM employee managers sometimes suffer headaches, muscle tension, or other things from sitting at a computer all day. Be sure to offer alternatives to the traditional desk environment if an employee calls attention to these concerns. It's just good business to treat your employees well. As a supervisor, your primary importance is to that of your supervisees. As a good manager, you should know employees will be at will. In other words, within reason, either party, whether that be the employer or the employee, can terminate employment at any time. If you're a union shop, more to come on that, your employees will, unless you're in a union shop, your employees will not be under a contract. So if you have an employee who is not performing to standards, you can start the process of progressive discipline. In short, this means you can progressively increase the sanctions given to an employee for poor performance in increments leading up to termination if that becomes necessary. As such, be sure you follow your set HR guidelines for your organization and always properly document every progressive discipline interaction. Also, I cannot stress enough the concept of succession planning. Just like disaster recovery, it's important to groom good employees for the next level of their career. Be sure to have these discussions early and often so you can retain good people and keep them within your organization. Speaking of labor unions, you might work in an organization with a union presence. While I could probably teach an entire course on the union arena, I would like you to know the 4 basic steps of the labor relations process. Listed on the screen is the natural progression of labor organizations, so be familiar with how it typically unfolds. Also, know that contracts will be renegotiated from time to time. So, at the very least, be on top of the latest updates in the labor negotiation process so that you know where the RIM function may fit in and how it may be impacted by a labor contract. For us numbers people, the next section might be a lot of fun. For those of you who hate math, fret not. I have no intention of making you crunch complex numbers. However, the RIM program management function often requires you to quote-unquote justify your existence, and this typically occurs through financial management. So with that said, let's dig in for a few slides. You will often hear financial folks talk of fixed and variable cost as they relate to the RIM program function. Listed on the screen are examples of both categories. Just know, fixed costs are those which typically do not change. In your personal life, these are items such as mortgage or rent, car payments, and other payments which you could quote-unquote set your watch to. These are things in the RIM function which deal with, for example, building leases, technology maintenance, different things which pretty much don't change year to year. However, variable costs, on the other hand, change. If you have a huge shredding event one year, for example, you may see a large upswing in your shredding and vendor cost. This cost would be considered variable because it could change from year to year. In short, just be sure to know the difference between these two types of costs and how they may play out in the RIM space. One equation, I promise, only one. Be sure to know how to compute a payback. Let's do an example. For example, let's say you purchase an electronic records management system for $200,000. Each year, you expect to save $20,000 in paper costs because the electronic records management system no longer requires you to use that much paper. As you can see, in 10 years, the $200,000 system pays for itself with the realization and cost savings of $20,000 each year. This formula is helpful to know as it can inform senior management as to when their investment is paid back. Be sure to commit this equation to memory. As a RIM program manager, you will need to ask vendors to help with solutions and probably bid out for your money. Let's talk quickly about the most common types of requests related to purchasing, otherwise known as procurement. A request for proposal, otherwise known as an RFP, is used when you know you have a problem but you don't know how you want to have it solved by vendors. This is the most formal of the request for processes and typically has strict procurement rules when it comes to content, timelines, and vendor responses. A request for information, otherwise known as an RFI, is used when you think you know what you want but need more information from vendors. It will be typically followed up by an RFQ or perhaps an RFP. Speaking of RFQ, a request for quote is commonly used when you know what you want but need information on how vendors will meet your requirements and typically how much it will cost. It may seem like these three things are pretty close, but there are distinct differences in the way these are managed. So make sure that you just know what the differences are, the subtle differences are in these different procurement types. And if you do have questions, let me know. This concludes the Module 11 commentary video on RIM program management. If you have any questions or would like more information on the elements of this commentary, please do not hesitate to contact me directly. Have a great week.